I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're very pleased to be talking with Julie Pierotti. She's curator at the Dixon Gallery and Gardens. So stay with us for a conversation with Julie. Julie, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And this is our fourth video podcast. So again, thanks for being part of that as well. We'll talk about all kinds of things, about the Dixon things going on, but let's start with the exhibit that just opened in the last, I think, couple of weeks here. Café Society, Art and Sociability. Why can't I say that word? In Paris from 1855 to 1914. Give us the quick snapshot, and then we'll go deep on all things cafes.
Okay, yeah. Café Society is an exhibition that looks at the role that cafes of Paris played in the development of modern art, starting with Impressionism, going right up to World War I. And how the cafes became, they're the places where artists met to discuss the ideas about art that would ultimately become Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Cubism, but also how the cafes themselves became the subject for works of art. So it looks at sort of the development of modern art through the lens of the cafe.
I was thinking about this when we were getting ready for this, and my exposure to Café Society was through Hemingway. And so reading in high school. So I think people my age, younger, whatever, right. I don't know how much Hemingway still gets read because he's, kind of an iffy figure in some ways as a human, but a brilliant writer. And I remember in Tacoma, Washington, in this blue-collar town, never been out of the country, reading about literally the whole culture of cafes and him talking to or his characters talking to artists and that whole life. And so I was so excited to see this that captures that existence, right?
Well, that's a big part of the exhibition is expatriate culture in Paris and how cafes become the home for certain expatriate groups. In Paris, Spanish expatriates had their own cafe. The Russians had cafes. The Danish had a cafe that they all went to. And the Rotonde, which was one of the cafes in Montparnasse that Hemingway went to, becomes, a hub for a lot of American cultural writers, poets, critics, painters, sculptors. And how the cafes become the home away from home. A lot of times your apartment in Paris would have been tiny. It would have been cold, uncomfortable. So the cafes where you spend your day, where you spend your evenings, where you spend your life, really. Yeah. And the people you meet there become your family. The bartender, the owner, becomes your family if you become a regular at certain cafes. And every cafe, every neighborhood had its own multiple cafes, really. But it would have its own sort of casual place. It would have its own sort of fancier place. And it just depended on who you were, what your budget was, and how much of a starving artist you were. It just depends on that. Those factors contribute to which cafe became your home.
And that's still, I've since been to Paris and a couple times now, and it's still just a huge part of being there and just the kind of magic of being in that place. Other cities have, New York has a version of it. Other cities I've been to have a version, but the Paris version is separate from, the kind of touristy areas maybe where you get it. And that's still pretty fun. But just if you get into kind of the real Parisian neighborhoods, it is so much fun to just kind of plop down into a cafe, and the way in a lot of places the seats sit facing out and the heaters in the winter that you can sit there and be removed from the rain and the heat and just kind of view this sort of beautiful city that's going about its business. And
it's been like that since the 19th century. Yeah. So for instance, by the end of the 19th century, Paris had something like 35,000 cafes. London had 6,000.
Wait, is it 35,000?
Yes, it's crazy.
The number, it takes you a second to kind of process what we're talking about.
No, it's true. And by comparison, London had 6,000. Yeah. So, the cafe it's not a Parisian invention. They go back to really Turkey is kind of the home of the coffee house, basically. But in Paris, around 1855, with the World's Fair of 1855 in Paris, that's when cafes really start to grow in number. And by 1867, there's another World's Fair in Paris where more and more come because there's millions of tourists starting to come to Paris. And there has to be places for them to eat and places for them to rest and drink. So that's when the numbers really start growing and growing. And they become really quickly part of Paris's identity as the cultural destination of the entire world. And the travel destination of the entire world is the cafe. And just what you're saying, it's so nice to have a place to plop down.
Right.
As Americans, we're so used to sitting down, get your food, eat, drink, and get out.
Right.
And so sometimes when you go to Paris, you're like, where is the waiter?
Right. I remember being warned about that by my father.
It's like they're not going to come check on you.
They're not. Yeah. You can wave at them politely because they're not going to bother you.
Right.
You can sit there forever.
You can. And that's really nice.
Yeah.
It's just sort of this one place where you can just be sort of and watch the world go by, especially if you're in one of those sidewalk terrace tables where you watch people, cars going by. And it's just, that's what they're there for, really. The
last time I was in Paris, it was a couple of years ago now, and we were in a kind of non-touristy area, and we kind of found this place we stumbled on. It was off a square, a little park, neighborhood park, and a lot of little kids, French Parisian kids, run around, and we sat down kind of looking out. And it took me a minute to realize how much quieter the city has gotten because of all the electric vehicles and a lot of the electric scooters. And so I can remember that being part of the experience was seeing the Vespa type scooters, not the electric scooters we think of now, really loud and kind of smoky and the kind of small diesel trucks and stuff. And it took us a minute to go, wait, it's so much quieter. And it's because of all the electric vehicles, which was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you think about, the time, and we're talking about here in 1850s, 1900s, Paris was very dirty, right? I mean, the cities they're just a level of dirtiness that we would be a little bit surprised by now because they are the paint. I have not seen the exhibit, I will fully admit, but I've seen some of these paintings before, and the paintings are beautiful. But it kind of belies that notion that they were kind of smoky and dark cities in many ways.
Definitely, and two things about that. One. Cafes there was a type of cafe called an estaminet where people would go, and smoking, it was one of the things you did there. It was like a place where people went to smoke. Cafes were kind of smoky places and kind of dirty, and people coming in off the street, and the streets aren't all paved, and there's a certain amount of dirt that's involved in it. Yeah. But at the same time, it's important to also note, along the lines of what you're saying, is that in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, all the way kind of through the end of the century, Paris is undergoing a huge renovation. It's going from medieval streets that are real crooked and narrow to the city of the Grand Boulevard that we think of it today. And that's all from Napoleon III appointed a man named George Haussmann, and they to renovate, to modernize Paris, and it goes through this process that's now called Haussmannization, to make the grand sweeping boulevards and to widen the streets of Paris. And part of that was to keep people from revolting and blocking streets. But it also led to the Paris that we know today. So there is a lot of construction going on in Paris. In the time period that we're talking about. So it is sort of a kind of a dirty place until it becomes gleaming Paris.
Remind everyone we're talking to Julie Pierotti. She's curator at the Dixon Gallery and Gardens. I always screw that up, and Kevin Sharp, the director there, will call me out on that. Your full title, though, do that for me real quick.
Martha R. Robinson, curator.
Okay. And it's the exhibit is Café Society, Art and Sociability in Paris, 1855 to 1914. It's kind of hard, I think, to get your mind around the fact that again, I'm going back to the Hemingway stuff in some ways, but it's applicable to the art and so on, is that people like Picasso are hanging out. You know, we think of the rare air of some of these painters and these writers, but they weren't that then. I mean, I think Picasso famously would paint things and kind of settle up his tab at bars and places by giving them a painting or that kind of thing. That's all this period, or the beginnings of this period and so on.
Yeah, so I mean, there's cafes that Manet goes to, and that's where he becomes the leader of the modern artist, of the independent artist. There, I mean, every sort of generation has their leader, and their leader has their cafe that they go to. Renoir, we have a painting by Renoir of the Moulin de la Galette, and that's, you know, in Montmartre, which becomes sort of the entertainment district of Paris. And there's, you know, go into the 20th century. I have to think about my century.
Yeah.
Then there's where Picasso and Juan Gris are hanging out. So it's just important to note that all of these artists are, you know, kind of regular people and most of the time poor and have their little humble cafes that they go to. And those cafes become extremely important to them as people, but also to their artistic development.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's closed now, the Café Keogh. So Kevin Keogh's a restaurant, coffee shop downtown for 15 years. And Kevin's been on the show at least once or twice and yelled at me the entire time. But Kevin's a friend. And Café Keogh, when it was really pre-COVID, COVID really kind of shut it down and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But he would talk about how European tourists coming to Memphis would flock there because the way he had set it up, the way the seating out front was, the way the windows were, it was cool. It was a bank lobby that he converted into this cafe. It would draw. It was just so familiar. So at the time especially when the trolley was running, people would get off the trolley and go, "Well, I've never been here. I didn't know about it. I didn't see it on a map. I visually recognized it." And so they'd come in and get. And he had a very kind of, you know, French European menu of everything from wine to coffee and, you know, drinks and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I used to go there a lot and again, got to be friends with him. But there's a whole way in which cafes communicated to people, right? And I didn't know, though, what you've been talking about with there were some for the Danish, some for the Spanish, some for the Americans, that it would, I don't know, imagine there are visual cues and of like this one has something that draws me to it at a time when maybe, I don't know if people, I should turn into a question, not as many people were literate, right? And so there's these visual cues that would draw you to this is a welcoming place, a safe place, I would imagine. Maybe
I mean, you can tell from the exterior of cafes what type or sort of what class of cafe they would be.
There we go.
And, you know, of course, the higher class ones are restaurants. I mean, and one thing we really wanted to do with this exhibition was define what is the difference between a brasserie and a cafe and a restaurant and a bistro. And so even just the name of the establishment would tell you what type of establishment it was. So Brasserie des Martyrs would be sort of like, you know, today some brasseries are kind of fancy, but at the time they really started out as breweries, places where beer was made. So they kind of had a lower class origin.
Sure.
But of course, a restaurant would be the fanciest of all of those, and the cafe sort of falls in between too.
Yeah. We'll be back here with Julie Pierotti from the Dixon. How long is the exhibit at the Dixon?
Through September 6th.
Through September 6th, and people can learn more and hours and everything at the Dixon website. Just search for Dixon Gallery and Gardens. But let me take a minute to do some housekeeping here. Remind everyone, this is The Sidebar. I'm Eric Barnes. The Sidebar airs as a radio show. Is a radio show? That sounds weird, Natalie. Is a radio show on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. But it's not just a radio show. It's one of many podcasts, now video podcasts, we do at the Daily Memphian, including our morning podcast, the AMDM with Mary Casciola, as well as Natalie Van Gundy, who produces all our podcasts and video. And many of the staff from the Daily Memphian are on the AMDM every morning, 5 days a week. We also have our Grizzlies podcast, hosted by Drew Hill and Chris Harrington. And we have our food podcast, Sound Bites, hosted by Holly Whitfield. It also airs as a radio show here on WYXR every Thursday at 11. I should also mention the podcast version of Behind the Headlines, the TV show we produce with the folks at WKNO every week. And all of our podcasts are available on the Daily Memphian site, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And as I mentioned, we are now moving all of them into video podcasts. So the YouTube versions and Spotify is video on Spotify. Check in with Natalie. In some cases, for Grizzlies. So all of it's kind of a process. But all of our videos on YouTube and on the Daily Memphian site, if that is how you choose to watch and listen to these. The WYXR shows, Soundbites and Sidebar, are also available at wyxr.org, or you can download the WYXR app. That includes all the shows from WYXR, both talk and music, archives of those shows, so it's a great way to keep up with what's happening on the station. If you're not a supporter of WYXR, it is nonprofit, listener-supported radio, so consider becoming a member or doing a one-off donation. And if you're not a paid subscriber to the Daily Memphian, do consider becoming one. We are the largest newsroom in the region. We are coming up on our 8th anniversary, crazy enough, and we are a nonprofit, so about half of what we're paid for is half of what we do is paid for by subscriptions, another 25% from advertising and events and so on, and then about 25% comes from donations from people like you listening to this. Recently, we had John Zena, now outgoing director of infrastructure and city stuff, planning, all of that for the city. Talked a lot about city planning. So actually, we could have had you here, Julie, and we could have talked about French streets and Memphis streets and good and bad development and all that. We also had Robbie Grant, the executive director of WYXR, on the show last week, which was fun to talk about all the things going on with WYXR. Behind the Headlines this week, we've got Mikkel Lowry, the Democratic candidate for county mayor. We recently had the Republican candidate, John DeBerry. We also recently had the Democratic candidate for sheriff, Anthony Buckner, on the show, and the Republican candidate, Brad Less, is coming up soon. All that is at WKNO.org or on the Daily Memphian or YouTube. But we are still here with Julie Pierotti talking about the Café Society exhibit. You mentioned the World's Fair. We don't do that as a planet anymore, do we? Right?
Well,
I was just thinking about that. I can remember when I was a kid, there was the Knoxville World's Fair.
Oh yeah, huge deal.
The New York one in the 50s, but it doesn't really happen anymore.
I don't know that they do. I would say the Olympics are sort of taken over that, but the World's Fair was way more. I mean, it was really like a business type thing, and it starts in London. First with this great exposition of the Crystal Pavilion, and London really, England really enforcing itself as the industrial leader of the world. And Paris in 1855 gets a, World's Fair and wants to really, do it with a bang. And they do. And for the 1855 World's Fair, I think it's something like 5 million visitors attend.
That's crazy.
Which is a lot of people, especially in 1855.
Right.
So that's when cafes really first start popping up and growing in number. I mean, they had existed in Paris.
Yeah.
During the French Revolution, cafes are very important during that moment. But they really grow in number. With the 1855 World's Fair. So that's really why we made it the starting point of the exhibition. And then 1867 for that World's Fair, I mean, it's even more visitors. It grows to something like 10 million visitors for that fair. And they're coming from all over the world. People are coming to Paris for this. And so more cafes pop up then, and especially one type of cafe called a brasserie à femmes, which is a brasserie of women. And it's a brasserie that's exclusively employs women. Oh. And that was because you could pay them less. I mean, the owners
okay, there we go. I was like,
yeah.
my naive, I was like, there must be something good about that.
Yeah, it was. It was a win-win in a way. It was the owners could pay women less to be servers. And, I mean, this was new. I mean, now we think of waitresses.
I see. Women weren't servers then.
No, not historically. Think of the garçon, the idea of the garçon, the waiter at a cafe, an aproned waiter. But the brasserie à femmes did something different. It employed women. And it was the women you could pay less. They often had to dress, sort of suggestively for 1867.
Right.
And that would entice men in to come and be patrons. And And the women, it was long hours. It was low wages, but it was actually more than they would have been making as laundresses or in factory positions. So it was sort of okay for women. However, they were harassed by male customers all day.
Right. I can't imagine. Well, unfortunately, I can't imagine. And probably less dangerous than if you talk about factory work back then.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh. Who are the artists on exhibit? Who are some of them that are in the exhibit?
Well, artists that you would know would be Edouard Manet. We have 2 works by him in the exhibition. Renoir, Auguste Renoir, the Moulin de la Galette that's in the exhibition is just really a special painting that we're proud of. James Tissot, American artists, Maurice Prendergast, Robert Henry. Oh, we have 2 Willard Metcalfs in the exhibition that are both just so good. And Vuillard, Edouard Vuillard, I love the painting by him in the show. And then we get into the section about women in cafes. So we have works by Jean-Louis Forain, Renoir in there too. And then in the last part of the show, we have great painting by Juan Gris, the Spanish cubist, along with Picasso. We have Picasso, Jean-Francois Raffaelli. There's a great, very important painting to the exhibition by him, and Edvard Munch, the Norwegian artist of the Scream that a lot of people have heard of that painting, but he worked in Paris as well and made an amazing painting called In the Tavern that's in the exhibition. I'm just so proud of it.
And it's a traveling exhibit, only 3 museums? Am I right about
that? The Dixon is the primary organizer of the exhibition, and I think people can feel that when they come through the show. But it opened, we had 2 partners, one the Ordrup Guard outside of Copenhagen in Denmark. So the show actually opened there in February. Then now it's here in Memphis, and then it goes to the Joslin in Omaha, Nebraska, September 27th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of fascinated by this stuff. How many years in the making was this?
Well, this was 8 years in the making. Okay.
So that's just amazing.
I know, and that's not actually typical. The pandemic, of course, I'm kind of sick of saying the pandemic screwed everything, but it did.
But I think we have to say, I'm going to interrupt you, and I apologize for interrupting. I go through that too.
Okay.
Should we stop saying it? But then I'm like, I'll say this to my kids, who will say to them, they're in their 20s, late 20s now, and they're like, well, I think I blame too much on that. I said, look, I'm closer to 60 than I want to admit. That was the most insane thing. And if we normalize, we have to kind of not normalize the time warp, the disruption. I just mentioned Café Kio, which really closed as a result, all these changes that we're still scarred by. But on the other hand, I'm with you where I want to stop talking about it or using it as an excuse.
It's just the truth.
That's my rant on
COVID. So we
started
organizing the show in 2018, and 2020 happened. We had to put the, international loan shows are a huge investment. I mean, investment of staff time, but also financial investment. And we just had to say, while we were figuring out, how long are we going to be closed? What's going to happen? And every other museum in the world was in the same situation. It was like, we have to just, pull the reins on every project that we're working on. So the show, really, we hit the pause button on it for a couple of years. I was still working on it.
Sure.
But I just didn't know what was ultimately going to happen. And really, 2022, 23, we really started getting serious about it again. And I went to Denmark in 2023, I guess. We had loaned 2 paintings to this museum, Ordrup Guard, which is just so good. It's a great museum. And I went just to see the paintings and meet the people there and see their collection, too. And saw their Renoir of the Moulin de la Galette and thought, I got to have this. And their director and their curator are really big on international partnerships. And we started talking and said they wanted to be a venue in the show. And our friends in Omaha at the Joslin, which is just a great institution, also came on board, and they had a lot of works of art to contribute to the project. So,
Yeah.
here we are, 2026.
That's very cool. And again, it goes through September
6th.
September 6th. You were nice enough to bring a book, a catalog of the. So thank you for that. I look forward to seeing it and to looking through the book and seeing the exhibit. With a few minutes left here, you've been at the Dixon. We were talking before. What, 18 years? Is that what we said? Yeah. What got you into this whole business, this whole profession?
I am from Memphis.
Okay.
I grew up here. I am a visual learner. I kind of say this a lot. I went to Catholic school, and you went to church 3 days a week in school, and you just spend a lot of time looking around. And so I'm always looking around. And I went to St. Agnes for high school and took art history there. I was just very lucky that I went to a school that offered art history. And I went on a field trip to the Dixon, and Jane Faquin.
No way.
Yes, was there, who was our director of education at the time. And she was like, you seem really into this. We have an internship program. And I was like, okay, great. And I never even thought that, like, there could be a job at an art museum. Right. I just never thought of it. So I went to, after undergrad, I was an art history major, and I interned at the Dixon between undergrad and grad school. And volunteered at the Frist in Nashville during grad school. They were a very young museum then, and it was really exciting to be part of their birth, really.
Right.
And then when I came back here, actually I worked for Lisa Kurtz, who had a small gallery very close to here. And I really didn't like it. And she knew Kevin. And when Kevin got the job, she came in with the commercial appeal and was like, oh, look, my friend Kevin Sharp got the job as director of the Dixon. And I was like, So I went in her office after she left and got Kevin's email address and was like, you haven't started yet, but can I meet you?
Oh, it was before he'd gotten the job, but hadn't.
Oh, no, he hadn't even moved here. He wasn't going to move here for like a few months, I think. And he probably thought, who is this stalker? In fact, I know he thought that. And I interviewed to be his assistant, like his secretary, basically, and was asking me all these like organizational skill things. I was like, and if you know Kevin, so you can picture how all this went.
Yes.
He was like, do you know shorthand? He's like, I don't know what that
Shorthand?
is. Yeah. And he hired an assistant who knew she was the best assistant of all time. I just love her. But anyway, long story short, I started as a curatorial assistant in 2007 and have been there ever since. And I'm just very lucky to do it in my hometown and have all of my family here. My husband's from here, so I have a lot of support.
It's a great museum. I love the museum, and just had this 50th anniversary, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And flowers, I assume, are in bloom right now, and the whole thing of it. So it's an amazing place. But we're just about out of time. I always ask people, what was your first concert you ever went to?
Wow. The first one that just pops to mind.
Sure.
For my 16th birthday, I saw the Backstreet Boys here, front row.
Nice.
Yes, I got front row tickets.
Pyramid? Would that be Pyramid then?
It was at the Pyramid.
Very good.
Yeah. I went with my best friend, and my uncle took us, I think he took us. It was really fun. And it was like 1990, I don't know what year that would have been.
Peak
Backstreet Boys.
Good old days. Natalie's over here saying the good old days.
I want it that way.
Tell me
Wow. Okay.
So
that's the first singing we've ever had in the history of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
I love to sing, Eric.
Okay. Well, no, it's good. That's great. Julie, again, people should go to the Dixon and see Café Society, the exhibit that's on through September. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. But that is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the show, you can get the full episode at YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, The Daily Memphian, or WXR. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.